Okay, morning, Matt. Good to see you.
Good morning, Malcolm. Lovely to be with you.
It's nice to see a younger face.
Well,
Right.
I don't think I had access to the kind of makeup artist that
No,
helps Dad out, but
you've
I
broken
tried
the
to type
rule.
myself up a little bit.
You've broken the rule. Pastors should have the great array of their library behind them. That's what they all do. And you've got kitchen instructions about
Well,
how
that's
to
it.
keep...
That's because, I'm in the church here in Aylesbury, but I'm upstairs in one of the Sunday school classrooms because,
okay.
just kind of COVID. My colleague is still in the office, but I moved up here, and so I've got lots of nice space, lots of light. But a few books. I've got a few books around me. But
have you got your coffee? That's the important thing.
I have.
Well, raise a glass. Okay.
So, there we are. Good.
Right. Okay. For those who are listening, our theme this morning is coping with with family life in lockdown. Many young families are finding it hard to keep going. They're doing homeschooling and so on. It's quite tough. It's a new sort of field of operation for most of you. The government's permanently uncertain about when to open schools again, and we sort of live in that bubble of uncertainty, really. Now, Matt Benton, who I'm speaking to today, is a pastor in Aylesbury with a young family, and I thought I'd ask him a few questions. First of all, though, Matt, let me ask you this personal question. How old were you in 1980?
In 1980, I must have been 5.
Right. Okay.
Well, 4 coming on 5. So,
okay. Well, it was around that time, maybe a year or two later, that the family von Benton walked into our life. Your dad was a school teacher up in the north of England, but him and I were both cutting our teeth as young preachers. And he came across to the church I was pastoring to fill in for me on a winter Sunday morning.
Oh, wow.
Well, here we are 40 years later, grown up, grandkids coming out of our ears. Yeah. And you and Chrissy are right in the thick of it with your own young family. So perhaps tell us a little bit about your own situation, Matt, today.
Yeah, so we're a family of 5, and we have, my wife and I have been married about 15 years, and we've got a daughter who's 8 years old, and a son who's just recently turned 6. And during this lockdown, we've had our 3rd child, a daughter who's now just turned 6 months. So last summer was born. So it's all going on as it is for families. And
so a few sleepless nights still.
A few sleepless nights, but she's doing all right. She's doing
all right. Well, that's lovely. Yeah, good. Well, between your parents and my wife and I, we've got quite a host of grandchildren. So we keep tabs on each other in that respect. Keep a good tally, you know. Anyway, now some children are able to get on with school work and so on quite well on their own. Others really struggle, don't they? How much sort of input have you had to have in helping them through that?
I quite like to meet these children who can get on with work on their own. So that gives you an answer, doesn't it? I think, they've needed quite a lot of input. My daughter, obviously a little bit older, is able to do a bit more on her own. But my son needs marshalling, otherwise you kind of discover he's kind of slipped away and to find his Lego or that type of thing. So that's so certainly they've needed our help. I think we found over these kind of few lockdowns that first time there wasn't a great deal of support or regular contact with the school, and so that was obviously fell a bit more upon us. This time there's been much more, and that's been good in that sense of kind of just having some contact and knowing we're doing the right thing. But I think it's kind of been trial and error for us. But I think the thing that's worked for us in both the kind of lockdowns is trying to find a rhythm that works and shapes a day, and that helps our kids with their expectations about what the day is going to look like. So in that
yours are still quite young. I think it gets quite complicated when you've got a bigger spread. I know some of my own grandchildren, they're a wider range in the sense of, and I know it's quite hard for parents to actually to sort of connect with modern methods of teaching maths, for example, could be quite different to what they experience themselves. So suddenly they want, the 14-year-old wants some help, and hang on, I don't know what this is all about. So that's quite tough, I think, for older children, but perhaps a bit easier. But I think some of the younger ones, it's concentration, isn't it? It's not. It's great looking at a screen. They're much more tactile, aren't they, children, in a way? So, yeah. Okay. What have been your priorities as a pastor in lockdown, on that sort of front, really? Obviously, you've got plates to spin, haven't you, as it were?
Absolutely. I think early in lockdown, there was a kind of moment of wisdom maybe for us as an eldership, and that was that whether the season would be a sprint or a marathon, and obviously it's proved to be a marathon, we should think about doing things that are sustainable over months rather than weeks. And I think that's been proved helpful for us, certainly for me, in terms of just that rhythm of life in this season, which can very much be wearying. I think again, in God's providence, last March we produced a Bible reading scheme in Lent, going through the Gospel of Mark, and we'd ask folk as they read the passage each day to think about this kind of question about how does this passage help me fix my eyes upon Jesus so that I do not grow weary and lose heart, obviously piggybacking off Hebrews 12. But, that theme of looking to Jesus, helping people, how are we helping? How am I helping the congregation to look to Jesus through this season where it's so easy for us to become weary and lose heart, has become, I think, one of the kind of dominant kind of priorities as I've and as elders, as we thought about shepherding the church. And I think alongside that, we've been aware that, have that active consciousness that as Jesus talks about us as disciples, he talks about all of us as little ones. Little ones who can be caused to stumble, little ones who can wander, little ones that we need to make sure we despise. And I think that type of spirit has been really kind of helpful in just helping me think about my pastoring. I think one of the things this season has done, as it's given me many more common pressures that I share with others in the church. And so, as other dads in the church, they're having the same pressures as I have of homeschooling as what we're talking about. And that's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing for me as a pastor to actually have those avenues. One of the things that has been a real encouragement for me, and we try to encourage this wider in the church, is just, I've got together a couple of other guys to pray with once a week. We meet on Zoom like this, really. We share a little bit about our struggles, our frustrations. I remember a particular poignant one of just chatting to one another about the need at times to say sorry to our kids through this season when the pressures become all too much, and of course pray for one another. And I think there's been that sense of, hasn't there, in general in this season, that we're all in this together. And I think that's been quite good in the life of the congregation, actually giving us great sympathy for one another and different things.
That's helpful. That's helpful. I think also we need to remind ourselves we're not professionals. We are just dads and mums struggling through alongside other ordinary believers, and it's not going to be easy. I think the other thing is there's quite a lot of anxiety about whether our children are going to be damaged long term because they've missed out on this and that and the other. I think generally we shouldn't be worrying too much about it. Kids are more resilient. I know there's concerns about mental health and so on, but we're hearing so much negative news. Kids are pretty resilient and they adapt more quickly than we think sometimes. And they'll catch up as well. We had one lad we knew well. He had a very bad early time at secondary school. And his parents are really anxious about his long-term education. Well, he's at Lancaster University now and loving it, doing really well. So, we need
that's
time.
it. And I think those concerns do increase a little bit when we've got older children and they're perhaps doing important exams or those types of things are approaching. And I think certainly my wife and I've just kind of taken the view that actually, probably this season it's not going to affect them. They've got a certain amount of academic ability given by God, and that will probably prove itself to be fairly similar this season or not type thing. And I think on that angle of mental health, I think there's just that reality of just being
Yeah, I
realistic
mean,
about this
our
sort of.
education system is to some extent just pragmatic and even artificial, isn't it? You know, with the timetables of aging categories and so on, they're not really inspired, are they? They're just a way to do it. And I think families are much more kind of flexible and creative in some ways than they realize. And
Yeah.
okay, well, that's helpful, Matt. Yeah, priorities as a pastor, trying to keep the right balance as well between looking after the family and looking after the flock. It's a tough one, isn't it? But it's always going to be tough, that one, isn't it?
It is,
There are some.
I think I'd just say as well is that, you know, one of the reasons why I'm up here is that, you know, we live right next door to the church. That's a blessing for us. And my daughter, which is obviously half term this week, but comes upstairs into this Sunday school classroom and does her work with me, and that's been helpful from a home situation, because we found that children can distract one another, you know, even if they're on their work, one person's lesson seems a bit more interesting than what I'm doing, and that type of thing. So she comes up here, and I think, you know, I've just kind of, you know, having that same rhythm. I know that there's certain times in the day where there's certain tasks I can get to, but I might be on call, as it were, with maths questions and that type of things. And there's other parts of the day when she's done her work where I know I've got more deeper concentration time and some things like that. I think overall, the thing that I feel that I need to keep mentally reminding myself of, the thing that can slip in this season, is my contact as a pastor with folk in the congregation.
Yeah,
that's the thing that can slip off the list. And so one of the things that I've tried to do is just when I'm working at my desk and I know I'm having a period where perhaps I'm struggling to make progress in sermon preparation, I have a list of people right next to me that I know I need to phone. And I say, right, I'm going to phone one person right now. So I'm going to switch from that. I'm not making progress. I'm going to make that, and then I'll come back to it. And it's a way of saying, actually, because I think those are that kind of pastoral care, which is obviously difficult in this season anyway, can kind of slip, because actually we're kind of pressed for time and we need to get sermons done for Sunday and all those types of things. But actually talking to people on the phone in this season, I think is...
I agree with that. I think the phone call has a huge place still. We do all this FaceTime stuff and Zoom and everything, but actually you can really concentrate better sometimes on what's actually being communicated when it's just a phone call and it's just words, you know. And I think really you can sometimes get really something a bit more kind of more meaningful across in that way. I was talking to two elderly people yesterday in the church I'm sort of helping locally, and obviously it really hit the spot with them, because they're more used to that in a way than all the tech. They're good at it, but they don't really find it that natural in a sense, you know. So right, yeah, and just sort of to round off, Matt, any particular books or Bible verses or sections of scripture that you've personally found helpful through this?
Yeah, I think, you know, lots of folks have mentioned, haven't they, in the season, that book by Dane Ortland, Gentle and Lowly, that came out last year, and what a soul refresher that is. And just, could commend that to anyone, really, particularly as pastors. I think, you know, great personally for our walk with the Lord Jesus to be reminded of his compassion and care for us. More recently, I've been pointed back to those wonderful verses at the end of Isaiah 40. You know, you'll remember they speak, don't they, of, you know, the Lord is the everlasting God. He doesn't grow tired or weary, but then reminds us that we do. You know, even youths grow tired and weary, even young men stumble and fall. And I think one of the things it's just reminded me is that, you know, seasons of weariness, which so many folks are facing, aren't they, and tiredness through this, are normal. Actually, they're normal parts of life. And unless, you know, those verses are telling me I think myself to be God. God doesn't grow tired and weary, but human beings, we do. And even youths grow tired and weary. And then alongside that, obviously, the hope, the kind of medicine or balm, if you like, to weariness is there for us, isn't it? And that hope in God, who gives strength to the weary, who gives power to the weak, who renews our strength. And it reminded me, you know, it's been reminded me as I've reflected of that, of Jesus in Gethsemane. How on earth does he go to the cross? How can he endure? Well, not my will, but yours be done. Is not kind of simply, is it, a declaration of obedience? It is that, but it's also a declaration of hope in God. Actually, I'm in your hands.
Yeah.
And that's where what's being said actually in Isaiah 40, actually, for the people there.
So that's the place to be, isn't it? The best place to be.
Best place to be. And of course that, and that's how the end of those verses speak, don't they? That actually, as I hope in the Lord, the promise is that there is a day ahead when I will have strength and energy and vitality beyond anything I've ever experienced. Soaring on wings like eagles, walking and not growing faint, running and
that will compensate for all the holidays we've missed.
That's it. That's the resurrection hope, isn't it? And so
great.
That's been good for my soul.
That's really good. Great to talk to you, Matt. We're going to pull the plug now. And we'll keep in touch. Okay, maybe
Absolutely.
See you again. Maybe we'll make your dad redundant.
No, they'll be calling for him back next week. But it's been lovely to be.
Okay. All right. Well, bye for now then.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Take care. God bless.